Hey guys, Thomas Cecilia Jr. here, aka Mustached Tom, and I'm here to review the movie Avatar. If you end up enjoying this review, which is sponsored, by the way, by my PayPal/Patreon supporter, I only currently have one, but if you also like what you see and hear here for this review, then please consider also joining my Patreon/PayPal, which will be in the description below, as well as a petition to help out smaller YouTubers, as well as my Discord, where you can chat amongst other YouTubers who are just trying to get by and help each other out. So, again, this video is sponsored by my supporter, my PayPal supporter, so thank you once again for supporting this video. And yes, I've never technically reviewed the first Avatar movie. I have watched it, but I've never actually reviewed it. I've accessed through my channel, I went through it just to make sure, and yep, sure enough, I've never actually went through and reviewed it. So, as per usual, I will review it as objectively as possible. Now, I know that going in, with the sequel coming out, announced and coming out with a trailer now, that this is a pretty interesting movie to get back to, as well as I am already aware that plenty of people have compared this movie to other movies of a similar plot where a Marine or, band goes to and eventually sides with the natives of a certain area. And I don't know, to me that often more feels like reviewers that just want to show off what movies they've also seen, rather than say, well, it's better or worse than that movie. I don't know, I don't want to make an extreme claim here to that effect, but I do feel like most cases where I hear, like, oh, it's like this movie, like, I try my best not to do that. When I do it, I try to say, like, what in that thing works, or what, like, I try to make that connection a little bit more meaningful, rather than just say, it's like this other movie. So I try not to do it as much, obviously, and I will try not to do it here. I know that there are other plots and stories like this, but, I think it is, I think this review can manage without, as I've written plenty of notes, with this little spectacle here. And that is one of the things I will say, is that in terms of visuals, because I know that is something that I don't think anybody would argue with, is that the visuals do, they held up at the time, and I would say they still hold up pretty impressively for what they were going for there. So yeah, that's what I'll say first and foremost. I know that usually doesn't come into my reviews. I usually stick with story, character, and plot. The sort of building blocks, foundation of what makes a story interesting, following the characters, making sure the plots, that, there's no contrivances or conveniences, making sure there are no plot holes, things of that nature are obviously what I focus on here, so this will be no different, but I did just want to point that out real quick for this particular review. Anyway, this movie starts off in a cityscape location filled with narration, with our main protagonist, Jake, who is wheelchair-bound, and he admits that times are pretty rough for him in the beginning of this movie, and that he feels like sort of this grunt outcast that, and as we get a little exposition through this world, or this futuristic world, there are already certain animals that are getting, like, cloned back into existence, which is something I completely forgot about how this movie opens up, so, yeah, and we follow his perspective as he enters this bar. He sees this aggressive man abuse this woman, like, by slapping her physically. So he goes in, and he tackles this man, and he is the one who gets thrown out for trying to be the hero that he thinks that he's being in this situation. So indeed, he gets rolled out and attacked, and the two men throw him out, and he gets informed by two other men who walk up on him that something has happened to his brother, and we quickly learn that his brother has indeed passed. So we get an interesting little eye transition, something again I didn't even really note. We see the brother burning in the inferno, and then we cut to him in the cryo chamber. So you could take that for what it's worth. Like, our main character has been frozen in his life, or whatever perspective nonsense you want to use there. But anyway, neat little cut as 5 years pass. So he gets masked up and trained or to move to the planets called Pandora. And as he mentions, the men that he's with, or the army guys that he's with, they never lose their attitude during this part of the narration. And we see an early hint of the attack as we see a truck coming in as they're landing, as he's moving in with arrows plucked into it. So we meet our bad guy of the movie, but for the sake of this, the Colonel, I'll just refer to him as that since that's what they call him in the movie. And obviously there's some oldish dialogue here where he says they're not in Kansas anymore, and that's the area that they're in, where this planet of Pandora is a very dangerous planet, and everything there is there to kill them, and he's set in his ways. So, what is something I picked up on in this opening little narration is that he specifically refers to the Na'vi, and that their bones are a lot harder than, say, a human's. I think that's what they were indicating in their little, lecture here. This is a little bit of what we like to call in the reviewer business world building. When you are told something like this information, this is sort of information you're supposed to take at face value. And I know that's a lot harder than to just say, well, that just seems a little inconvenient, but that's the tricky thing about world building is, when dealing with, say, something like Avatar, where you're in a new world and you're trying to introduce a new thing, and you're trying to get this information across, and one way to do that is to have the, higher ranked soldier warn the lower ranked soldiers that, these guys are tough, they're not going to go down easily. It's a way of not only introducing the audience to it, but the people that are in the lower ranks. It's not information that these people are privy to. It is not followed by a line such as you should know. It is rather, this is information you just should learn. This is very crucial to world building, as it helps bring in the audience to say, this is what you should believe about these Na'vi-based people, that they do have these type of harder bones. Again, this is a way of doing it a lot more naturally, and I gotta give credit to the writing here, that it actually does flow, and this is after their corny out of Kansas line, is that they it's a bit of a world building exploration of what these, what these Na'vi are like. So this is information we as the audience need, but again, how do you portray that audience in a way that feels like it's natural? And again, having someone to teach that to a bunch of new recruits seems natural. It flows. So they do a pretty good job there. We meet Norm, a scientist expert who knew Jake's brother briefly from when he was there, and Jake records his thoughts, which are also doubled down for his narration purposes. and they begin to link up, and Sigourney Weaver plays Grace, who is introduced here at this point in the movie, and she, at this point, hates the outcome that she has been given a soldier rather than another scientist. But that is this essential situation that they find themselves in. She goes to Parker. Parker is a character who's so, characteristic, another antagonist of the film, is solely in there for the money. They make no, hint of hiding this at any point of the movie. They're here for the expensive rock, which is called, I believe, unobtainium. A little bit of a ridiculous name, sure. And again, a little bit of world building goes with that rock later on in the movie. Again, naturally feeding us as well as the characters the information at the same time. A really natural way to do this. So again, a little bit of props actually in terms of the writing. It's feeding the characters as well as us, rather than it's just feeding the audience, which is something you want to avoid if you can as a writer. It's the stuff you think about, how you present information, how you execute it. So anyways, so they get locked in, and Jake wakes up in his avatar-based body, where he can feel his legs again, and of course he feels this adrenaline, and, this is props to the actor. I think the acting in this movie deserves a little bit more credit, He's excited for this feeling, and you clearly see it. This grunt does a little bit more than I think a lot of people give the main character, credit for in this performance. Particularly when he's in the Na'vi form, is where you see a lot more of that energy, start to really come out in his performance. So I do want to give credit there for that. This isn't just grunt, grunt, grunt. We have a lot of character development here going on, obviously. And it's really straightforward, but, it's present really quickly as well. So he runs out, excited to, be able to do that in the first place. We also get introduced to, after Grace and them meet in their avatar forms, we meet Trudy, aka our helicopter lady for our movie. And then Jake goes to see the Colonel. And the Colonel says on his day one on this planet, he's the one who got these scars that you can clearly see. So they want to present a very, someone who saw this planet, came in first day, got attacked, and got this sort of inclination of how this planet works, because, that one attack essentially set his whole, protective sort of defensive mechanism in place. So they give the Colonel a little bit more something than just, he's the bad soldier man, and I do, again, more credit to the writing here. Good on ya. You did a little bit more than just, well, he's the Colonel, man. They gave him a little bit of he has a little bit of a backstory. You can kind of see where you would be coming from when, you're on this new planet and you would get attacked and you would be a little bit defensive. That seems to follow. So anyways, Jake is told to give the personal information about the Na'vi, and this is what the Colonel wants. He wants to learn more about how to get these Na'vi out of the situation. He wants the materials as well, but he's willing to let Jake, take the lead. And again, this is, more respect to this character, this antagonist. It's not just, I'm gonna gun immediately. It's like, no. We currently are in a situation where we can try to get these people out. So let's attempt to do that first. And again, I like the links that they go to in this movie to provide that continuation, rather than just be gunman. So I have a lot of respect for this movie so far, believe it or not, in terms of objectivity. This movie is actually doing a lot more than I think a lot of people, to just compare it to other movies and say, it's pretty mediocre. I don't know. Yeah, there are some corny lines, sure, I'll give you that. But outside of those, there is also a lot of good lines and good dialogue here as well that help build up these characters. Anyway, so he heads back in and we get to see some more creatures and landscapes, and the movie takes its time to show us these things. And we see them back in their, form. We see Jake leading with the gun. Grace is there, and they go inside the school hut, where he notices some gunshots, and he's trying to ask Grace about it, but she kind of ignores it outright, as it had a bit of emotional impact, as we will learn a little bit later on. But as the scientists get their groove on finding a specimen that they're intrigued by when they leave this location, Jake kind of gets a little bored because he's not into the whole science stuff, so he kind of wanders off on his own a little bit, and we see more of, again, just the world. He's interacting with the red plants that, shrink in when he touches them. We see him bump into, or see this large rhino-esque, creature where she has to tell him to, not move or, stand your ground, and he taunts it, as he, takes on that more marine-esque type personality. But we see these darker dog, wolf, hyena-like creatures, that come in, and Jake is now told to run because these creatures are apparently way more aggressive, and indeed they give chase. So his gun gets tossed and he gets chased away from the other two, significantly further away. I will admit that they use T-Rex-like noises here for the animals, which is a little bit, I don't know if it's tongue-in-cheek or something, or they just didn't have a custom noise that they could make yet, that they could just make on their own, but it's a little bit of a cheapness there, I will say that much, but I don't think a noise takes away from the movie's overall presentation that much. It's honestly a nitpick of, if anything, if I were to, place that under a criticism. It's a nitpick of a criticism. It does not affect the characters, and it does not affect the plot, so therefore, again, I would pinch that under a nitpick. Anywho, so he makes a custom spear, getting desperate. He doesn't have his gun anymore, Jake does. And we see our Lady Navi sort of tracking him, getting ready to shoot him down. But these white jellyfish flying creatures is the best way I can describe them. One of them, lingers in front of her, and she decides not to shoot. And again, world building. She teaches him, again, something he wouldn't know, what these things are, and therefore teaches us what they are, and what significance, why she wouldn't shoot there. And at first I was like, oh, that's actually a criticism, but no, they actually explain it later on in the film, so therefore it's actually a praise. They're saving it up, they're building up the world building, they're getting you to look at these things and be like, what is that? And then they'll proceed to explain when we get there. So, anyways, he's his, let's see. So, he's there, left alone for a bit, and he's trying to fight off the dog creatures. I'll just call them dog creatures for simplicity's sake. As they're sort of trying to follow him and track him, and he gets tired of waiting, so he proceeds to get attacked, and he attacks back. So she comes in and ends the suffering of one of the ones that were hit down, and she kind of scolds him and is trying to get it on her own way. But as he sort of just starts to follow her, he notices how the life beneath them lights up, and we see him watch her pray to taking the life of this animal, and continues to follow her. And she kind of smacks him down a bit, and says that his attempts at doing whatever he was doing here was just sad. And he wonders why he was saved. And this is where she explains that he has a strong heart with no fear, and that moreover, as I mentioned before, that these white jellyfish-like creatures are like seeds, or spirits rather. And again, that is why she didn't attack, because she sees that these spirits, this one singular spirit, interfered. How she perceived that moment. And indeed, more of these spirits, as I'll call them, start to encompass the area around him and start to, in fact, sort of latch on to him temporarily. So, she's now convinced through this to have him follow her continuously deeper into the Na'vi world. We see her boyfriend, quote unquote, or the one that she was betrothed to, I'm assuming is the sort of inclination I was getting. I called him Sue for short. I know that's not his full name. He's sort of the one that gives Jake the hardest time, but then eventually becomes like the brother-esque type character. So we'll follow that as well. We also meet the woman Na'vi's mother and father, both leader tribes of the Na'vi that they. So the mother, anyways, inspects him over, taking a sample of his blood even, and she is just like the Colonel, but in their own way. She wants to learn through teaching him their ways, the human ways. So both sides we are now seeing are doing this, but for different reasons. Rather, it seems, or it's presented more as a curiosity for them. Again, it's just in pure presentation. The line is almost exactly the same of learn from them, the humans in this instance. So, anyways, she mentions this line about she can't teach what is a full cup, but he claims to be empty, and so he has the most potential to learn. Her name is, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Netiri, and, he struggles with that word as well. I'll call her Net for short. N-E-T for short. So she sleeps in one of these grass-like beds, and he does as well. And as Jake proceeds to wake up, he goes over the story of what they went through with Grace. So we get our Peter guy, our corporation head honcho, saying how the tree, is where they need to get to, essentially. And he wants, wanting to push that whole thing about wanting the natives to leave, wanting the Na'vi to leave, before an attack actually has to occur, as they see it, as the humans see it. So Jake, proceeds to jump back in, and this is where he is, attempts to connect via the tendril thing that we see, the connecting tendrils that they have in their hair, to connect it to an animal. And he kind of gets on it for a brief moment, but falls. Sue, the brother, as I'll call him, is not impressed currently. So Jake informs the army side of like, yeah, I'm starting to get in there. I'm starting to figure out what these people are like. Kind of keeping it simple. But the science base moves because they're not liking how much the military are interfering with their process. So they move up to the floating islands, and we see the majestic floating islands as not Nate. What was his name? Not Peter. Or not Parker, whatever. Anyway, nerd guy. Anyway, moving right along. Oh, Norm. I gotta think normal when I think of that name. Anyway. So, anyways, we hear his narration again. It could be attributed to him communicating with the camera, which is a pretty convenient way of doing narration that sort of doubles down again as this. As how the rocks, the unobtainium, is also what is allowing these rocks to even float in the process. So again, more world building. So we're starting to understand that the rocks have a little bit more going on than we initially thought here. So we cut back to Net, him getting with her, and he, she guides this big bird-like creature, aka like what I refer to as like a dragon-esque like bird-like creature, and she explains how when they connect, they are connected forever, and she begins to fly off in a very meaningful way. This is where we cut to a little bit of a montage of Jake learning from both her as well as Norm back to back. So he's, digesting double the amount of information, and how it's based on both language and a little bit of movement as well. So again, we are learning with our character since we don't know this stuff. And this allows, since he's getting deeper into these mechanisms of the Na'vi group, Grace is allowed back into the deeper Na'vi group since she was her backstory seemed to indicate that she was pushed further away when she left. Meanwhile, while Jake is seeing Net go throughout the business, we see more of the nature of the Na'vi, how one of them may pass away, and how they're sort of absorbed into the tree. We spend more time just looking at the world and these whirling birds that like fly up. We learn, and this is where when he is with her, with Grace rather, back in the human world, I believe, he doubles down on asking about the school again, and this is where she opens up about it and how Nate's sister died in this attack where these troopers came in after like this whole kerfuffle happened, and it led to a very bad situation. And she says like scientists aren't supposed to get emotional, but you can tell that she still did. and that even through the avatar process, that is something that sticks with you, that it lingers to the real you, and that seems to follow pretty naturally with everything else we understand about the avatar-based bodies. We cut ahead to some point ahead where we can see he's actually learning to speak Navi or like he knows like a basic sentence. It seems to be, something he probably learned from one of the two. Is, again, since we had the montage, we can easily chalk that up to that point. So, a little bit of progression, if you will. So, Jake, in the process of this, kills an animal and does the prayer sufficiently, and Net sees this and says that he is now ready to take his own dragon bird. I'll just call it a dragon for simplicity's sake. So they head up there, and the brother, as I call him, says that Jake's up first. So he goes up and he asks how the dragons are gonna like choose him, and she makes this saying that the one that will choose you will try to kill you, and he's a little irritated by that, but he's willing to proceed forth. So he does so. He almost falls, but he manages to get back up on his own, and connects with this dragon, his own dragon, and he struggles a little bit. When he tells it to, direct communication, it follows via the connection, as I mentioned earlier. And Net, heads back out with him, having a little fly session with him. And this is where we see him trying to even fly like them, even in his own gesture and posture of how he's sitting on the creature, adjust to how they're doing it as well. So we get to learn more about, he sees very briefly this other high source of energy. He goes over it with the group, again confirming with us the information that we need to know as an audience and what they want to know as the, trying to understand the Na'vi, to try to figure out how best to get them to leave. Then we see the Na'vi hunting these beasts, the more chargy beast that we saw earlier. And this is where we see her for the first time. I'll just call her Nate, because I hate saying Net for her. Nate. This is the first time she copies the saying that he had, which is like, hell yeah, or something simplistic like that, but she says it. So she's like kind of getting buddy-buddy with him now, too. But a bigger beast, a bigger dragon, begins to chase the two of them as they're riding their little dragons. So they hide deep into the forest, and we learn, as she teaches him, and teaches as well as us, the name of Turok, a clan's leader generations ago that read this big beast, which follows the same name. What I gathered from this. Or a similar name anyway. So, as he's narrating again, as well as speaking to the camera, he's saying that he's beginning to, the worlds are starting to feel blended, or rather, one world is starting to feel, the human world is the one starting to feel like the fake world, or the dream world, as he puts it. Does a quick shave, and the Colonel sits with him after the fact. And this is, again, the Colonel, and for what it's worth, as, evil as he comes out to be later on in the movie. He does say that he will deliver Jake these real legs that he can use, and you know what? For what it's worth, I actually do believe him, at least at this point. He says he's a man of his word, and based on, the amount of space he's been giving Jake, I actually do think that he was going to keep up his end of the bargain. And again, that's due to the dialogue and the setup and the characters and how we understand them to be currently. And Jake says that he's one step away, and again, the Colonel gives him that space to be like, yeah, I was about to attack, but I'll give it to you again. Really solid, and again, that to me doubles down that I actually believe the Colonel would have been a man of his word. If he had somehow found a way to get the Na'vi to leave, that he would indeed be, rewarded with legs, as a human anyway. But he gets sworn into the Na'vi culture. And this is where we see the shoulder scene where they touch shoulders and they pray. So Jake and Nate go into this prayer location where they hear voices of the past through the trees. And she says now that, he is in the scoop that he can persist to find a woman. And she even persists in trying to be like, what about these two, before, insinuating even herself. So she was trying to lead him away a little bit there, but she was already kind of, hinting, and he was already hinting at one point in the movie. I just neglected to pinpoint which location it happens in. Anyways, point is, they kiss, and yes, they touch tendrils, which, yes, I'm just gonna say, yes, this is a sex scene. They make out on top of their tendrils touching. So I'm well versed in everyone making fun of this, which is odd because there are sex scenes in other movies, and it's just how they do it as the Na'vi. Simple as that. I can't believe I have to say that, but people really do get up on that. Or I think they did, and they kind of joke at it. Anyway, sex scene over. So vehicles begin to rev near their location, but Jake is pulled awake and his avatar is left behind, and Nate is left there to try to pull him away from the incoming attack. And he's trying to rush back in. So Peter forces the movement, and Jake is forced to take action, taking out their cameras and making sure that they can't advance, but he gets shot at, so they have to run. But the Colonel sees this, and now things are getting a little bit more like, now the Colonel's like, what the fuck, man? You were supposed to, get them to leave. You weren't supposed to attack us. But Jake, in his naivety, did not notice his brother, too, was mad. So they get in a little bit of a kerfuffle here. But Jake continues to try to warn them until he is completely shut down from that. And it is up to Nate to defend the body. So anyways, Grace tries to explain to Parker about how beautiful and how intense the trees of this particular planet and the Na'vi work with the trees, explaining how, for them, this is their network, their brain, that the tree is like a living brain, as she, again, through the rocks that they're trying to collect, it would be interfering with that larger brain, and, this is like what they're actively trying to get from. So, the conflict is obviously becoming more and more torn between the two sides here at this point. But the Colonel's pissed, so he plays the tape about how Jake says that, the Na'vi are not wanting to leave, or at least not anything the humans are trying to provide them currently is getting them to leave. And we see the Na'vi even run past some of the burnt vehicles, so the vehicles are stopped for the time being. But Tracy warns that the attack is gonna, that an attack is coming. So, once again, the Colonel, or I think he warned, or Peter, I forget which one he talks to specifically, but he warns one of them, like, give me time, and I believe this is Peter he's referring to, or talking to, and he says, you got an hour. And again, more licenses, more like, come on, we're giving you this. We're really getting tired of waiting, though. But in their process of awakening, they get binded, because now the Na'vi don't even trust them. Because when they were out of their bodies, they were sought out as demons, as they get called very briefly. The military move in, and the Colonel says, diplomacy has failed. Which is a line I unironically hear more good guys here than bad guys. So that's an interesting line to come out of a villain, if anything, again. Speaking to, again, some of his more humane traits, if you will, or being as humane as long as until he got tired of it, of attempting to be diplomatic. And again, I gotta give credit to the movie for giving him that length of time to do so, to be that character, to be like, no, I'm willing to attempt the diplomacy route, the villain here. So I think, I give credit to the villain, or the way the villain is written, rather. Anyways, the mother frees them, saying, like, if you're really with us, then prove it and help us out here, and they help out indeed. And as Tracy, the helicopter lady, sees that they're attacking, she's like, nope, I didn't sign up for this, and she leaves. The Na'vi cry passionately, and now Nate loses her father in the process of this attack. She loses quite a bit in this singular movie, I must say. And this is where she's obviously also really mad at Jake as well. So he gets woken up again. And this time, it is, the three of them get arrested when they are woken up this time, but the helicopter Trudy lady comes in to the rescue and helps out the three of them, that being Jake, what was her name? Grace and Norm. The three of them who were arrested for, coaxing this attack, or rather, siding with the Na'vi, as they put it. So they run out, they get out of the jail, and the Colonel catches on to their little fleeing tactic. And while they are trying to escape, Grace gets hit by a gunshot. So they fly over to safety, and he sits back into his little body, and he's like back where the ash is from the fire. So he trades up his small dragon for the bigger one, Torok. And we cut to the Na'vi praying, and Jake gets to them. And this is where the tribe, they respect this. This is like high-end Na'vi levels of like what he just did. And yeah, it does technically happen off screen, but, you know, I'm willing to buy it to the extent of, like, he's been chosen, if you were destined. And what I do like about it is that while that is true of him being destined, they never actually say that he is per se destined to do this. Even though I think that's kind of implied here. So he gets the bros' respect at this point, and he tries to get them to help out with Grace, but she does not successfully pass through her body to the Na'vi body, and she passes away to join the tree, as it were. So Jake says his speech, now a part of the Na'vi crew, and in fact, since they seem to have a little bit of time here, since, you know, their mission as far as the military was concerned is complete. They took down the tree. They believe they have some time to, like, collect themselves and figure out, you know, what's going on. They dealt with the traitors, or, you know, the traitors are off somewhere. But a new threat comes as the Na'vi or Jake is collecting more and more Na'vi from the several tribes we see them pass across. It's hard to tell how much of a massive crew they accumulate, but just seeing it, there is a lot more Na'vi than I initially thought there were when I first saw this movie. That's how much I will say there are in this movie. And they also, you know, based on Jake's, message, is that they have the home advantage as well as this, this large crew. And so the armory crew see this start to accumulate, so the colonel's like, oh, nope, having none of them accumulate, that's not good. So they head out. They head down with the mechas, and they head down with the choppers. The ground team stops first, and the Na'vi move in from both ends. And the Na'vi hit really hard. And, you know, I think this is another scene, when I initially saw it, I didn't give as much credit for this, but I will now. Having this big, massive dragon use their weapons against them. They're using the helicopters against the helicopters, and the creature's massive size and scale is that of the helicopter, so I can totally believe, since they're of equivalent scale, that the dragon can totally scoop up around it and throw it with a bit of force. So again, that's just pure scaling, and how I figure that would work. And again, more credit to just the spectacle of it. We're seeing them play really smart. The arrows that they're shooting them in the weak spots, the glass windows. They're not hitting, like, it seemed to be like, yeah, there was that one shot earlier from the first attack of, like, them using the arrows, and I will say that's a bit of a bad spot for the movie. I would say, because it doesn't blend well with this part of the movie. I will say that's, like, the only criticism that's like, yeah, that one's like, they had a few shots in and they couldn't break the glass at that point for whatever reason, and now they can. So there's a little bit of that's like the biggest convenience. But I don't know. There are a few other factors that I definitely considered. Spacing is actually one of them. One thing I noted about the first attack is that the ship is a lot closer to them, meaning that the arrow does not have enough distance to travel, which means it doesn't have as much impact. I think that's how that works. Again, I'm not a bow expert by any means. This is me assuming this. I'm assuming that's how that works. If you get more space, the arrow gets to travel further and faster when it's traveling. And it's going downward, not upward. And I think that actually would help with momentum, I think. So I think that actually fits. Again, that's a really tough call to make. Because in the second scene where they're above shooting downward at a distance on their dragons. So there's a little bit more to consider than just, it magically shifted. There's a little bit more to consider, so there's a little bit of leeway there. I'm willing to give the movie here. Anyways, in the process of this attack, Tracy gets killed. She fights back against the military, and her process gets her blown up. The animal rhinos come back in to help. And this is, where the black doggos come back in to also help. And this is where, Nate sees this and she's like, oh, your prayer to the tree was answered, and now we have all these new allies on top of the ones we have had before. So, Jake is making his way closer and closer to the main ship and eventually gets there. He, grenades another one in the process. Yeah, this is a really big convenience, because I did not see him set up grenades previously, so I'm not sure how he has grenades now. It's the biggest, convenient thing that he just happens to have on him for this little attack, where he's able to hit the first plane, and then, almost blow this one up as well, the main ship. But he also gets hit in the process. The colonel, while his ship goes down, he gets into this mecha suit and jumps down like a badass. And this is a bit convenient, but the colonel does find the location of where the body is hidden, and Nate comes out to protect him, the body, as well as Jake coming in after almost getting attacked in the process of all of this. And this is where we see Nate save Jake with 2 shots, and, eventually crumble to his death. So Colonel's dead. Jake is also injured to the point where he also wakes up out of his avatar body, struggles to get his mask on, but Nate realizes what's going on fast enough to recognize that she can rush in, get the mask, and present it to Jake just in time. So, Sue, the brother has to be killed after being taken down. He was still alive-ish. So he gets his little moment. He's proud to have been a part of that. And Jake, as well as her, is chosen to be the new leader of the Na'vi. He makes his final narration/log entry, saying how he's gonna have his birthday, as he puts it. And we see the new little swaying traditional moment of this. And, of course, the final shot is his eyes awakening as the Avatar, him gaining access to that body forevermore as he officially joins the Na'vi. And that was Avatar. And you know what? I think this movie is a lot better than I remember it being from when I initially watched it. And I didn't once compare it to another movie. How about that? At least I tried my best. And it was a pretty lengthy review. This is a long movie. And I think this movie holds up actually a lot better than I remember it being. There aren't that many contrivances when I think about it. There was the grenades, which, it's a little convenient for the ending. And then the arrow one, which, there's a little bit of leeway for that convenience to take place. So I'm willing to bite the bullet and say that one's not that bad. And outside of those two, I'm really struggling to think of, Yeah, there's a little bit of corny dialogue, but it's some military jargon, it's some old school stuff here and there. There's like one or two lines that would fall under a bit cringe for back in the day. But outside of that, this movie is quite impressive. And again, there's quite a lot of other dialogue outside of the cringe lines that are really, really good. Help world build, help the character and us learn simultaneously with the character. And in that regard, there's really smart writing decisions. This is a really solidly written movie, and I gotta give the movie credit for that. Again, the Colonel isn't just that's a character that I definitely re-look at and go, they did a little something extra there. And they didn't have to. They could have just made him generic, angry, shoot, bang guy. And that would have been, kind of meh, but I like that they were willing to give him the whole diplomacy thing. They were willing to be like, no, he's attempting to do the diplomacy thing. Again, a lot of smart things, a lot of things I'm in favor of when it comes to not just writing, but world building. This movie is really good at world building, and when you have believable world building, and you're following along because a character is there to teach the other character, the newcomer, Jake, our protagonist. He's our vessel. He's our avatar in a sense of, to communicate and learn about with this world, their language as well, and he has other sources to learn their language through Norm. And yeah, they montage it through, but I mean, again, this is a long movie, so I think a montage is well respected, and we see him fumble a little bit here and there and, work his way up to things, so I think that's a pretty, typical way of doing a montage anyway, so I'm not even going to discredit that. In terms of a final score, I'm actually going to give this movie an 8 out of 10, or a 7. I think I'm going to stick with an 8. Again, if the biggest convenience I could find is a conveniently placed grenades for the final setup, like one thing that, yeah, it's a little cheap, but outside of that, there isn't really much. And I might have missed it. There might have been a really quick scene that I might have missed that might have explained it, but, even outside of that, I just think that there's too much in terms of the character building, too much in terms of the good writing here for me to ignore, for me to go lower than a 7 at most. At lowest I would go at 7 out of 10 to say it's still a solid movie, and that's with the convenience in mind. So, that is my full supported review of Avatar, and if you ended up enjoying this full review, please consider liking this, commenting, subscribing if you haven't, and checking out the links in the description. One will head you over to a petition that will help out smaller YouTubers get their own little tab, help them get featured. You can also join my Patreon and join my PayPal to get more videos like this, lengthy, objective reviews that will help support me and the channel continue to grow. So please check those out. Hit me up and join me on Discord for easier communications, and meet other smaller YouTubers who are trying to find their way in this crazy world of the YouTube landscape. And with that, until next time, everyone, bye-bye!